The Human Relic Hunter. Not all derelicts are lifeless. Part 1. The void stretched endlessly, a black sea of nothingness that seemed to mock Drin's every effort. He slammed a clawed hand onto the console, glaring at the unresponsive scanner display. Come on, Seraph, don't make me beg. Run the scan again. This time, try harder. The AI's voice crackled through the cabin, dry as a sandstorm. Running the same scan for the 11th time will not yield a different result, Drin. Insanity is repeating. I will disconnect you, Drin snapped, pointing a finger at the overhead speakers. I'll replace you with something cheap and cheerful, like a singing navigation app. Seraph paused. Scan initiated. Again. Leaning back in his captain's chair, Drin tossed a fragment of ration stick into his mouth and scowled at the empty display. He was no stranger to the void, it was his livelihood, after all. But this part of the Orion cluster was different. It felt heavier, more desolate. Even the usual background radiation seemed subdued, as if the universe itself had forgotten this corner of existence. Still, if the relic was here, it would all be worth it, you know, Drin said, shifting in his seat. Humans were supposed to be these big, galaxy-changing badasses. Conquerors, philosophers, explorers. So how come their tech is always buried in the worst parts of space? Seraph's reply was immediate. Possibly because they annihilated themselves. He grinned. Dark, but fair. The truth was, humans fascinated him. They were the ghosts of the galaxy, a species that had vanished long before his ancestors had even discovered fire. All that remained of them were myths, relics, and the occasional data cube full of encrypted gibberish. To some, they were nothing more than bedtime stories. To Drin, they were his ticket to fame and fortune. And if this lead panned out, it would make every miserable moment worth it. Months earlier, on the High Leshton homeworld, he'd bought an ancient data cube from a trader, too oblivious to know what he had. Drin had taken one look at the faint Terran glyphs etched into its surface and handed over the credits without haggling, a rare moment of generosity, though he'd never admit it. Deciphering the cube had been a nightmare, but what it revealed was worth every sleepless night. A fragment of a star map, pointing here, to the Orion cluster, and to what the data claimed was a human vessel. An intact human vessel. Anything yet? He asked, jabbing at the scanner display for the 4th time in as many minutes. For a moment, silence. Then, finally, the display flickered. A faint, solitary blip appeared, barely visible against the static. Drin froze, his antennae twitching. Seraph? The AI hesitated, almost as if it was reluctant to answer. Running enhanced analysis. Confirmed. Structure detected approximately 1.2 parsecs ahead. Composition consistent with Terran alloys. No active propulsion or communication signals detected. His heart skipped a beat. He leaped to his feet, claws clattering against the console. Huh. I knew it. Who doubted me? That's right, nobody. He jabbed a finger at the empty cabin, grinning like a fool. Your ego is distressing, Seraph deadpanned. Ignoring the AI's jab, Drin leaned closer to the viewport, his grin morphing into a thoughtful smirk. All right, he muttered, opening a compartment beneath the console. Let's suit up. You find an ancient death trap, you don't walk in wearing your best casuals. He hauled out his relic hunting suit, a patched and battered piece of gear that had seen more duct tape than maintenance. The helmet's visor was scratched, the seals were grungy, and one knee joint made a faint clicking noise whenever he moved. As he began strapping it on, Seraph's voice chimed in. That suit has a 24% chance of failing under moderate duress. And you have a 100% chance of being irritating, Drin shot back, tugging the final strap tight. We all take risks, don't we? Slowly, the shape of the derelict came into view, a massive, angular silhouette hanging like a corpse against the faint light of distant stars. Humans, Drin muttered, shaking his head. They always built their stuff to look like it was already halfway to falling apart. The wanderer inched closer, and the derelict's details became clearer. Its hull was pitted and scarred, the kind of damage that told stories of long-forgotten battles. The name of the ship, scrawled in faded Terran script, was barely legible. "Can you make out the name?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Seraph replied after a moment. "Eternal Resolve." Drin let out a low whistle. Dramatic. Humans always had a thing for drama, didn't they? Possibly because they were often at war with themselves, Seraph offered. "Yeah, well, I'm not here to psychoanalyze a dead species," he said, settling back into the captain's chair. "I'm here to get rich. Now let's get closer." If I'm lucky, they left something shiny. As the wanderer drew nearer, the scanner flickered again, momentarily disrupted. Drin frowned. "Seraph? What was that?" "Unknown interference," the AI replied. "Residual energy signatures detected." Residual. Right. That was comforting. Drin exhaled, shaking off the creeping unease. "Relax, Seraph. What's the worst that could happen?" The derelict loomed larger, its shadow swallowing the stars. For the first time, Drin felt a flicker of doubt. But he pushed it aside. After all, no one got famous without taking a few risks. And this? This was the biggest gamble of his life. The eternal resolve loomed larger with every passing moment, its jagged outline cutting through the darkness like a warning. Drin leaned forward in his chair, eyes locked on the derelict as he adjusted the wanderer's trajectory. The ancient vessel was massive, far larger than he'd anticipated, and every scar etched into its hull whispered of a history long forgotten. "Well, Seraph," he said, his tone light despite the flutter in his stomach, "I'd say we've officially found the galaxy's worst fixer-upper. I mean, look at this thing. It's got more dents than a Crothy pub brawl." The AI's voice responded, dry and measured. "Apt comparison. Both tend to end with someone drifting lifelessly in space." Drin grinned, letting the barb roll off him. "That's the spirit. Keep up the encouragement, and I might just cut your sarcasm subroutine in half." "Do that, and I'll replace my subroutine with an audio loop of your snoring." Seraph shot back. He snorted, adjusting the ship's scanners for a closer look at the derelict. The hull was pitted and burned, the result of what must have been an ancient battle. Some of the damage was so extensive it exposed skeletal frameworks beneath, lending the eternal resolve the eerie appearance of a gutted predator. Faded Terran glyphs ran along the ship's midsection, barely visible beneath centuries of accumulated cosmic grime. A peculiar series of etchings stood out among the scars, patterns that looked almost deliberate, like symbols or warnings. "Hey, Seraph, those marks look weird. You picking anything up on them?" The AI scanned for a moment before replying. "Unknown origin. They are consistent with Terran design but may also indicate post-damage tampering. Or graffiti." "Right," Drin muttered, tilting his head. "Because nothing screams millennia-old human death trap like vandalism. Bet some pirate-carved kill rack was here before getting atomized." "Statistically plausible," Seraph replied, "though the energy readings I'm detecting are decidedly less humorous." That gave him pause. "Energy readings? You told me this thing was dead." "It was. However, as we've approached, I'm detecting faint electromagnetic pulses originating from within the ship." Drin frowned. "Residual systems kicking in?" "Possible. Or, Seraph added with a pointed pause, not. The lights in the cabin flickered, drawing Dreneth's attention. His grin faltered, replaced by a cautious squint. Okay. You're officially ruining the adventure vibe. Stop that. Noted, Seraph replied. Shall I also refrain from pointing out the 34% increase in scanner interference and system instability? Drin rubbed his temple with one claw, muttering under his breath, just had to buy the AI with a personality. Could have gone for the cheap silent model. But no. Despite the banter, unease began to creep into his chest. Something about the eternal resolve didn't sit right. It was too still, too silent. Ships didn't just drift for thousands of years without someone salvaging them or breaking them apart for scrap. All right, let's dock this thing, he said, shaking off the tension and focusing on the controls. The derelict's docking port came into view, a jagged, partially damaged circle on the ship's side. He frowned. That's not exactly welcoming. Neither is the increasing power surge from within the vessel, Seraph said. Relax, Drin replied with a forced chuckle. It's probably just a loose capacitor or some ancient human toaster trying to reboot. Nothing to worry about. He guided the wanderer closer, gripping the controls tighter as the docking clamps extended toward the derelict. The first attempt failed, the clamps grinding against warped metal. Drin cursed under his breath, pulling the ship back and adjusting his alignment. Human ships, he muttered. Built like tanks, but dock like toddlers. Why can't anything just work? Perhaps because this vessel has been adrift for several millennia, Seraph quipped. Thanks for the reminder, Drin shot back. You're a real ray of sunshine, you know that? The second attempt succeeded, the clamps latching onto the derelict with a metallic clang. For a moment, all seemed still. Then a low, reverberating hum vibrated through the cabin. Drin froze. Seraph? Did the ship just sigh at me? Unclear, the AI replied. However, I am now detecting faint rhythmic energy pulses deeper within the vessel. Drin exhaled, trying to laugh off the tension. It's fine. Haunted ships don't exist. That's just holodrama nonsense. The cabin lights flickered again, this time longer than before. A faint vibration rippled through the wanderer, setting Dreneth's teeth on edge. Totally fine, he muttered, grabbing his gear and strapping on his utility belt. Nothing weird at all. Just a big, creepy old ship that's definitely not plotting to kill me. Self-reassurance, ineffective, Seraph noted. Drin rolled his eyes, standing at the airlock as he stared at the sealed hatch of the Eternal Resolve. His claw hovered over the manual override, hesitating. Here goes nothing, he muttered. As he reached for the lever, a faint sound echoed through the derelict, a metallic scraping. Something was moving. Drin froze, his heart's hammering in his chest. Oh, come on. Creepy noises too? You've got to be kidding me. Recommendation, proceed with extreme caution, Seraph said. Yeah, no kidding. Drin replied, forcing himself to smirk, despite the cold sweat running down his back. He gripped the lever tighter and muttered, what's the worst that could happen? With a sharp tug, he pulled the override. The hatch hissed open, revealing only darkness beyond.